Welcome to this bonus episode of the 6K Sports Sedan Challenge presented by Continental Tire, where today we're taking the Lexus back to the dyno to see if we can make some more power. That's right, the Flexus is back and it's going to flex some more on the dyno, and that's because in the original dyno test where we tried that all for swaps ECU in the car, we could see that there was still some refinement that could be done to the tune, to the ignition timing and the fuel mapping. It was running a little lean and it had a weird sort of a step in the ignition timing low in the power curve where we could see they pulled a bunch of timing for safety, and it was too much pulled out there. So we sent all of our feedback to Yuri at All for Swaps and to Brandon at Quantum Auto. Quantum Auto is the North American distributor for All for Swaps and these types of ECU services for your UZ powered Lexuses. And they were kind enough to revise the mapping based on our feedback, and they sent us back two ECUs, one of which is in the car right now. That one is called Supercharged Tune A, and as you can see, this one is called Supercharged Tune B, which I believe is the same revised mapping, but with different VVTi tuning. So you can see right here, he wrote on here, VVTi maps are different. So we're going to test ECU A first, which I've actually been running in the car for about 3 or 4 days now, and I've got to say my butt dyno is loving it. It feels way more powerful, and the throttle response is better. There's a weird sort of a tip-in issue where when I first get on the gas, it kind of hesitates a bit, and then it really like hits boost all of a sudden. So it's like VTEC kicks in and it kind of snaps my head back. So not sure if that's a throttle tuning issue or something else. We'll investigate that a bit today with John at BMS Tuning, where we're going to go and do this dyno testing session. But other than that, man, it is driving exceptionally well on the street. It feels like it's up on power. So I'm really curious to see if what my butt dyno is telling me is confirmed by a real dyno or if it's all placebo effect. But I will say overall, the drivability is improved. It feels like the power delivery is much smoother throughout the entire RPM band. All right, we made it to BMS Tuning. You guys will be familiar with this place by now. This is where we've tested both the Flexus and the M5 before, and we're going to try out ECU A as it's labeled and see what kind of power it makes. Wow, this is John from BMS, by the way. You will remember him from previous dyno videos here, and that is a big improvement. I didn't expect to see this much change, but apparently ECU tuning works.
Definitely does.
So
that's why we're in business.
Right? So obviously Yuri from All for Swaps has made some changes to the air fuel ratio, because you can see he put fuel in here, although we're still a little lean here, aren't we? We're kind of like 13.5-ish here.
A little bit.
But then it drops down into the 12.5, up into the high 12s, and then down to the low 12s again here. So much better than before.
Yeah, there's still a couple small changes I would say to be made for safety.
Yeah.
But this is much better than before.
And you can see the blue line is our old baseline from the last time we were here, and the red line is our current max power run. And wow, what a difference! Like we're picking up like 30 foot-pounds of torque down here, picking up like 20 horsepower, maybe 25 horsepower in the mid-range. that's really going to be noticeable when driving.
Consistently better, especially the torque down low for a heavier vehicle. It's going to really be noticeable and get it moving.
And you were saying, like, initially we wanted him to put some timing back into it down here.
Yep.
And he's done that, but he's still been a little conservative here, which you were saying is probably a good thing.
It's probably a good thing, like especially with the Supercharger, the power comes in so fast. You don't want too much timing initially, because that's where you're going to get your knock.
Right.
Especially with a heavy vehicle. So he's still being conservative. It's safe. There's no knock there, and huge gains just from little small changes.
And you don't think we're running into any like fueling issues where we're running out of injector or pump, because we're making power all the way to the top end?
I don't think so, no, because he added fuel and the fuel added, and it's still there, like right at the top end. It's right where it needs to be. There's still a couple areas, maybe right here, between 45 and 57, that he could add a little bit. And then down here in the beginning, 27 to 37, he could add a little bit more fuel.
Right.
And then keep like a nice consistent, 11.8, 12.0. I mean, it's only 5 pounds of boost, so it doesn't have to be super rich.
Too rich, yeah, but still a huge improvement over what we had before. And having done a few days of driving on the ECU, it feels like a whole different car.
Oh.
It feels way quicker. In fact, I'm a little bummed out that I can't have a rematch with the M5 Touring, because I feel like I'd be a lot closer in those roll races, and I'd beat him even worse in those drag races. So, wow, what an improvement. So we do have that other ECU to swap in now, which, from what I understand, from what Brandon at Quantum Auto told me, the only changes Yuri made was to VVTi.
Okay.
So the fueling should look the same, but it hasn't had any street driving, so it hasn't had any time to do any learning. So maybe we'll need to make some extra pulls to do some learning.
We'll do a little bit of driving on the dyno, and then we'll do some more extra pulls and see what it does.
So here we've got our overlay of our new best baseline, which is tantalizingly close to 300 wheel, 298.4 against our old baseline. And if we throw in the run with that second ECU that they sent, we can see that it's basically the same as our old baseline. And having chatted quickly with Brandon at Quantum Auto, he did confirm that he thinks that tune was actually the old tune, just with some changes made to VVTi. So that's probably why we saw maybe a little bit of a difference in the top end there.
Yeah, because it picked up, I mean, it's literally an overlay. Aside from maybe up here above 5,500, it picks up, 5 horsepower, 5-6 wheel.
Right.
But it loses everywhere else compared to this tune.
This more updated tune. So obviously we are going to pull ECU B out of there, go back to ECU A, which has this big power gain. And however, I do have one minor complaint, and that is the throttle is very touchy. So when I'm at a stop sign and I roll off from a stop, it's like it suddenly goes from not making any power to suddenly feeling like it goes into boost, and it kind of takes off on me. And I thought maybe that was in the throttle mapping, but you're thinking it might actually be related to the blow-off valve.
So the bypass valve on these blowers is basically just a little vacuum actuated unit, and I think maybe what's happening with this particular motor, since this is obviously not the stock blower from an engine like this, is that it's just opening and closing too quickly, because it's always spinning, and then all of a sudden, you can see it here, it will just snap back.
Right.
So I think what we're going to try to do is just to put a little restrictor in here to just allow it to close and open just a tiny bit slower.
Okay.
And maybe that's going to help that.
So John's in the car and he's just going to give it a bit of throttle, and we can see here that the bypass valve is snapping open very suddenly when he gives it just a little bit more tip in. So we are pretty sure that the problem is at the bypass valve.
So we just made a little restrictor here out of just a little grub screw with basically like maybe a 15 thousandths hole in the center, and then we made a few other ones progressively larger. Yeah, and then we'll try and see, just in hopes that slow that down and get it to the feel that you want it.
Adding it more gradually.
Yeah. Okay. It's still going to open. It's just going to open a tad slower. That's kind of the idea.
Okay. So we put the one in with the smallest hole drilled through it, and we're just going to give it a test cycle here and see how it behaves as John tips into the throttle here. Giving it the same amount of throttle as he was before, he's seem like it's snapping open, so that's a good sign. Yeah, wow, it seems to be resisting that like sudden snap open. And when it gives it some more, it does open wide open, so might fix the problem. We're gonna have to go and do a street drive and see how it behaves on the street, but it seems like that might actually be a good way of tuning this. Well, it seems like a whole bunch of win all around there. That went really well.
Yeah.
And thank you for your pro tip on tuning that bypass valve. I'll let you know how it works on the street.
Yeah, let me know.
And by the way, when I came here for the road trip episode, I said you guys were doing a lot of European car tuning, and then I come in here, it's all muscle cars. It's like LS everything in here, isn't it?
It's kind of everything. I mean, I guess a lot of LS, but we do a lot of European cars too.
Yeah, it's impressive, the collection of stuff you have around here right now. Really cool and eclectic. So if you're doing any LS stuff and you need to make power, look this man up. He will help you out. And thanks again for letting us use the dyno.
No problem.
So here's a typical scenario where when I pull away from this stop sign, as I got on the throttle a little bit more, it would like snap my head back, and you can still feel it surging a little there.
I couldn't.
You couldn't. Well, I could still detect it, but it's way better than it was with that restrictor in there. So I think that definitely proves that that's where the issue was coming from. It wasn't a throttle tuning issue. It was a bypass valve issue. So
that's good.
I think we could even go to maybe a slightly more restrictive restrictor.
Sure.
But this is very drivable. So I'm certainly happy leaving it like this for the time being. And if it starts to bother me, maybe we'll put a slightly smaller hole into another one of those little...
Yeah, that's kind of the beauty of it. It's a super simple fix. Just reduce the size, right?
Yeah. So we are cruising in non-power mode just because the way this ECU is set up right now. If you want to drive in fully automated mode, you need to be in normal or ECT. And you'll see, it feels a lot peppier. I'll give it a bit of a send here for you. And you can experience the wonders that is the Lexus. Well, went into full traction control mode there, but...
Dude! Holy!
I know, it goes good, eh?
Yeah,
You feel the difference.
It's a very noticeable difference, especially up top. It's remarkably smooth.
Isn't it? Considering how rough this road is?
Wow.
Yeah.
And like the power band feels super linear.
Yeah, it is. Definitely. It's filled in that flat spot that it used to have early on in the mid-range. I think because he put some timing back in that area. So it feels way snappier off the line, where before it was kind of like a slow build. Now it's like, oh, wait a minute, there's power right away. So that really changes the drivability of the car a lot.
It's not slow.
It's not slow.
It's certainly not slow. Like, it's not incredibly fast to the point where you're like, holy crap, this is snapping my neck. But when you start moving, like...
Yeah, and I rolled into it there just because I didn't want to light the tires up.
Yeah, like it goes
bumpy
good,
as hell
man.
here, but...
Oh, yeah.
And you can see the shifting snappier now too.
Holy.
See how short those shifts are? Before the shifts were like really like a long, slow shift. Now it's much punchier, but it's not like a harsh shift. So I think he's found a nice sweet spot there.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And you know, the thing that actually blows me away is it's so low noise, it feels so low effort. Like, this thing just moves quickly, whereas so many other cars, it's just like roar, coming to life to really get you moving.
Exactly.
Where this thing's like, you know what? I'm just cruising along. I'm gonna floor it.
Yeah.
And it's got good power.
It does.
Wow,
it's got some balls now.
Man.
And it's so under the radar as far as the noise goes.
Oh, it's so good.
And it's so low effort. Like I really don't feel the urge to manual swap this right now because it just drives so well.
It's perfect.
Like
There's no way.
The tuning that he's done on the ECU has really made the auto much better.
Yeah.
It feels much more modern in the way it shifts, much crisper. You know, it'll hold higher RPM longer. It just gives it a much more sporty character. So really, really happy with all that. And man, you can get these ECUs tuned for a couple $100. Like, it's not a lot of money.
That's crazy.
It's kind of a no-brainer because it just wakes these cars up so much. So
and it just works so well. Like,
yeah.
Why mess with a standalone at this point when
I just don't see the logic.
So much tunability through that factory ECU.
Yeah.
So I think it's a huge victory, and the boost in power is surprising. Like, I'm not gonna lie, the first time you took me for a drive, I was a little underwhelmed on the stock ECU. Now, this, I think, has found its sweet spot for sure.
It really has, and I think there's still a little bit more there. I am going to send back the ECUs one more time and we'll see if Yuri wants to make any more refinements, but just looking at the air fuel ratio and where the timing still may be a little conservative down low, we might be able to get a bit more power out of it. But really, like at this point, we're chasing small gains.
Yeah, you're not going to see 20.
No,
wheels,
I don't think so. We're not going to see that kind of jump again. We might see 5 or something, but really, I think my thought process is, well, the more we can refine this map, the more others who wanting to replicate this setup can just go to Quantum Auto and say, listen, I want that map for my M112, Elate manifold setup, and boom, they're good to go. They don't have to go through this process. So I kind of view it as like a service to the community at this point, and a service to myself, because it's just fun to see the car progress and
for sure.
and, play around with it a bit. So all in all, I'm really loving this car, and it's pretty much perfect. Good. I wake up some mornings and say, oh, I should put an LSD and a 6-speed in it. But once I go for a drive in it, I'm like, no, it's perfect.
Yeah,
it does really exactly what I want it to do.
So
it's just the way I want it. Now that you guys have seen how the car drives with that revised tune, there's one more thing I want to do, and that is put a proper camera in the car for security and safety, basically. I got whacked in my Tundra last year, and I didn't have a card in my camera, and I really regretted it. It still didn't work out. It still worked out fine because there were witnesses, but I think having a camera in your car is really valuable these days, just because if you get in an accident, you have proof that you weren't to blame, or you have proof that you were to blame if that was the case. But in any case, I think it's well worth doing, and this is actually designed to work with our Atoto head unit. So this is made by Atoto, and it should just plug right into the back of our head unit, and that way I will actually have a preview on the screen of what the camera's seeing. So it should make it super easy to set up. And as you can see, it's a really nice little, this was only like 45 bucks US on Amazon. Really nice little camera here. And it's actually like on a swivel, so you can aim it super simply. Comes with like an adhesive piece of tape there. So this should literally be a 5-minute job to install. Oh, and by the way, I don't have a radio in there, Pete. So I think we maybe didn't plug the antenna into it or something. So let's investigate that while we have the head unit out. Well, that was pretty easy. Just pop the deck out and plug this guy in, and you can see it is already working, and that's because this Atoto head unit comes with the app pre-installed. So it's called HD DVR app, but you could download that app onto any Android head unit and plug this in the same way, I think, as long as you have a USB port on the back like this one does. So you can see it's already working. You can see how handsome I am on screen there, and really that's all there is to it.
You said this was going to be an easy job, right?
I did.
Yeah, well, it isn't, because for whatever reason, the A-pillar piece of plastic here does not want to come off. It's at this point, you can see I've like yanked it out far enough, but it does not want to pop off here. And there's like this weird clip up here. We read online, if you don't pull it in the precise way, it just breaks everything. And I'm at this point where I'm going to break it if I pull any harder. However, I have managed to snake the wire for the dash cam around here, and we're just gonna run it down like this. But this is super weird. If you guys look here, there's like lube.
Yeah, wow.
It's like this grease. Real thick paste here. I don't know why. I don't know if somebody did this because of a rust preventative measure or what, but there's just like all of this grease along here, and it's in here too. Like,
oh, weird. There's a ton of it in there.
Look it.
What is that about?
I don't know. Maybe like my hypothesis on this is there was squeaking going on, and someone thought, oh, maybe I'll lube this up, because they probably heard squeaking coming from this area. But yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I noticed that the door seals, these rubber seals on the door out here, have been squeaking on the car a lot, and I cleaned them with Sonak's door seal cleaner.
Right, yeah.
Which made them squeak even more. So I bet he was hearing the door seal squeaking, and he thought he'd lube that instead.
I don't know, maybe. It's just weird to see something like this, and it's everywhere. So nevertheless, the hard part is done. I just had to take pretty much the bottom part of your dash
No big deal.
and now we can run this wire to the radio and we'll be good.
Installation complete, and it's working like a charm, and I do really like how like low profile this whole setup is.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Don't you find a lot of the dash cams are kind of big and bulky, especially the ones with like an LCD built into it, where this not requiring the LCD, it's just really nice and low profile and unobtrusive. So I'm pumped on that for 45 bucks US, or I think it was 60 bucks Canadian. As for the radio, we realized that the factory head unit doesn't actually have a traditional antenna wire that runs into the back of it. There's a radio tuner in the trunk that has that wire. So if we wanted to wire this in, we would have to run an extension from back there all the way up here. And frankly, it's just not worth it for me. I literally wanted to use the radio one time when my phone died, and that's just because I was too dumb to plug it in and charge the phone while I was driving. But normally I'm either listening to podcasts or something like Spotify off my phone, and as long as I don't let my phone die, I will never need the radio or want the radio. So rather than going through that hassle, we're just gonna leave it as is. So no radio for the old DP, but it'll be just fine with all this other tech I got in here. Well, that's a wrap on this bonus episode on the Flexus, and man, I am more pumped than ever on this car. It drives better than I did before. I'm still a little bit sad that I didn't have this tune in the car when we did our track battles. It would have been closer than it is, and maybe in the future we'll do a track battle version 2.0 where we actually turn some lap times in these cars, because I know a lot of you guys were asking for those. Frankly, these aren't lap time cars, but who knows, maybe we get bored this summer and we decide to do it anyway. But all in all, really pumped on how well this car is driving. So thank you very much, Brandon at Quantum Auto. And thank you very much, Yuri at All for Swap, for continuing to develop this tune. And we may do one more revision on this tune. I'm not sure we'll necessarily shoot a special episode on it, but I'll certainly give you guys an update on that on social media if we go ahead and do that. Because I think there's still a little bit of room there for refinement, but man, it's driving so well right now. I'm really, really enjoying the car a lot. And I think it really proves the point that this very simple setup that we went with, this non-intercooled Elate manifold and this M112 supercharger, works remarkably well with the factory ECU, especially if you get this custom tuning service from All for Swap. And the fact that it's so affordable, you don't require a manual swap, you don't require a standalone ECU to enjoy this car with boost, I think is really pretty remarkable. And by the way, I did misspeak once before where I said if you want to do a manual swap in these cars, you really need to go to a standalone ECU. That's not the case, because All for Swap does offer a ECU service where with the original auto ECU, if you manual swap it, they can retune that ECU to work properly with a manual transmission. So again, you could have some fun with this car without having to go to a full standalone setup. So that's it, everybody. I'm gonna go and cruise, enjoy my big body Lexus here, and watch head snap as I cruise by in this thing, because everywhere this thing goes, it gets a lot of love.